going to air it out. Down the field. Catch and the touchdown.
It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Here's your host, Nick Kosko.
It's College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. I'm your host, Nick Kosko. We are presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu, located inside the Attila's Gym in Egg Harbor Township. We're going to take you up to 9 o'clock here on this Saturday morning on October 30th, day before Halloween. Things are promising to get spooky this weekend as we have a lot of high-profile matchups. We could see a lot of wrenches thrown into the college football playoff picture. First rankings come out on Tuesday, so folks, this is the prime time now of the college football season. Of course, we didn't get an upset on that little Thursday night game earlier this week. Coastal Carolina edged out Troy 35-28. But I'll tell you what, we could see some upsets today. We're going to have some crazy games in my mind, and namely, we will start with one of the ones that I am going to, of course, break down a little bit later. During the pick segment, by the way, 28-12 on the season, 4-1 last week after a 2-3 week back in week 7. So we bounced back quite nicely last week. The only game we had crossed off, I should say, was the Wisconsin-Purdue game. Purdue plus 3.5 at home, and the Badgers finally played what was arguably their best game of the season. But we'll stick with the Big Ten for now to open up today's show, and it's Jim Harbaugh, folks. The Jim Harbaugh narrative is he can't get it done in these big spots. He's 3-3 against in-state rival Michigan State, and he has never beaten Ohio State. Of course, they didn't play last year because the game was ultimately canceled due to COVID, and the rest is history. Ohio State gets the exemption. They end up being the Big Ten East representative in the Big Ten championship game, and they go on to win that, go to the college football playoff, dominate Clemson, and then they get dominated by Alabama, of course, in what was otherwise a weird season for college football overall. But this year, back to normal, and now Michigan is in position to be one of the best teams in college football. Now, for the latest AP poll, they were ranked number 6, okay? And now Michigan State, who they take on today at noon, mind you, this isn't a primetime game, this is right at noon. So we're going to kick off this week with Michigan State. This is in East Lansing. And the Spartans are 7-0 as well, but they're number 8 in the country. So this is a top 10 matchup, and all of a sudden, this is easily the biggest game of the week. Easily the biggest game of the week. Now we have Ohio State, Penn State. It's always going to be a good game, but we'll dive into Penn State a little bit later after their upset loss to Illinois just last week. But you look at this game between the Wolverines and the Spartans. It's all about Jim Harbaugh. Now, you can look at Michigan State. You could say, well, they have great quarterback play this year from Peyton Thorne. Transfer running back Kenneth Walker's is having quite the season. He's a Heisman candidate right now. Mel Tucker, the second-year head coach, what a turnaround job after last year's disappointing year number 1, where, heck, even my Rutgers Scarlet Knights dominated this team back in week 1 on the road, and just quite the flip of the script here in 2021. But no. This is all about Jim Harbaugh. All about Jim Harbaugh. Because if Michigan loses this game, they will drop, of course, their first loss of the year. They're going to probably drop, I want to say, maybe out of the top 10, depending upon what else happens. Because Iowa is still lurking around at number 9 overall in the country. They have a big game against Wisconsin as well today. But Michigan could be borderline out of the top 10 with this loss, and there goes their college football playoff hopes. Because to me, if they can't beat Michigan State on the road, they're not going to beat Ohio State at home, because Ohio State, to me, is the far and away best team in the Big Ten again. After some, we'll call it inconsistencies earlier in the year, and including the loss to Oregon. Everyone thought, okay, maybe this is the year Ohio State is vulnerable within the Big Ten, but yet they still have yet to lose a Big Ten game under Ryan Day, which is mind-boggling to say the least. But we'll dive into, of course, the Buckeyes and the Nittany Lions in a little bit. But just circling back here, this is another one of those seasons where you're like, okay, this is the year for Jim Harbaugh, right? This has to be the year, okay? They're 7-0. They have an amazing running game with two guys in Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins. Cade McNamara is a solid quarterback, and he's getting more solid quarterback play than he has in the past couple of years. They have the freshman J.J. McCarthy, who's also there. He looks like a much better passer, down the line, but he's being mixed in, so we don't know how much he's going to play today or how much he's going to be playing throughout the rest of the season as well. But he's been getting in there, and he's been making some sort of an impact. So it's like, all right, and you also have a stout defense. And when you look at Michigan, they, as far as their schedule is concerned, I'll just run it down for you, folks. Dominate Western Michigan, dominate Washington, dominate Northern Illinois. Then they just squeaked by Rutgers, which is back. This is back when I thought the Scarlet Knights were going to be a legit spoiler in this division, but that was the start of their 4-game losing streak. They go on the road to Madison. Now, again, this is not the Wisconsin team of a couple of years ago, where this team is definitely going to run through the Big Ten West. But again, it's in Madison. It's a very tough place to play. That's why Iowa is going to have a tough matchup later today as well. But they go in there and they beat them by 21. Now, their closest game of the year was against Nebraska a couple weeks ago, again, this is on the road as well. Nebraska, tough place to play. Nebraska is really not really that good this year. Now, they are, what are they, 3-5? I think they're 4-5 now, or 3. I have to look at the record again. But they're not. They're teetering on the edge of bowl contention. They're 3-5 right now. They've had back-to-back losses. They just lost to Minnesota last week. But tough place to play in Lincoln. They go out there and win 32-29, so that they squeak out a win right there, despite Nebraska scoring 22 points in that third quarter. And then they come back home after a bye week, and they defeat Northwestern 33-7. That game was close early on. Northwestern might have turned a small corner, so they're at least competitive for the rest of the year, but Michigan ultimately runs away. But this week is all about the Big Ten. It's all about Jim Harbaugh, because if he loses this game, then when is he ever going to win this big one? Now, wouldn't it be funny if he if Michigan lost this game today, but somehow, some way they beat Ohio State at the end of the year? Plus, don't forget, Michigan still has to play Penn State at some point as well within the next couple of weeks. And Penn State, of course, dropped all the way to 20 due to their loss against Illinois. But to me, that'd be just absolutely hilarious. This is the year Jim Harbaugh finally wins the big one, as in, Ohio State. But he can't beat Michigan State on the road. That would be hilarious. But the point remains. If he can't win it this year and finally get to a Big Ten championship this year, is he ever? Is he ever? Because with the way Michigan State's playing right now, you look at the turnaround for Michigan State, where this team was below 500 last season. And Michigan State did beat Michigan last year, by the way. Don't forget that. Michigan did lose to the Spartans last year in Ann Arbor. It was an upset. Michigan was ranked. But you mean to tell me this is very similar to 2016? Okay, let me take you back to 2016, and I talk about this a lot because this is just how close Jim Harbaugh has been to the Big Ten championship game. Now, the narrative could have been changed his first year at Michigan. Remember that game in 2015 where it was in Ann Arbor. All they have to do is punt on fourth down, but the punter dropped the ball and Michigan State recovered it and returned for a touchdown as time expired to beat the Wolverines in Ann Arbor. That kind of threw everything off its kilter. I'm not saying Michigan was going to beat Ohio State that year, but that kind of screwed everything up for the Wolverines that year. But then the next year, they do play Michigan State, and they win. They beat the Spartans that time. However, again, I'm taking you back to 2016 here. And when I do that, you have to be reminded how close that Ohio State game was. Remember, number 2 versus number 3, Ohio State, Michigan, biggest game of the year, the game of the year, or in a long time, I should say. The winner takes the East Division. The winner goes to the Big Ten Championship. The winner essentially is going to go to the college football playoff. And I want to give credit where credit's due. Joe Klatt said this on Fox Sports. But it's been something I've been thinking about for a long time. What would actually change about Jim Harbaugh's career, the narrative surrounding him that he came with the big one? If you remember that game, it went to overtime. And this game's at the Horseshoe, by the way. It's at the Horseshoe. All right? There was a controversial play, 4th down. J.T. Barrett, quarterback at Ohio State at the time, ran for it left side, okay? He was marked what looked to be short. They took a long time to look at it, review the spot, and they gave the spot. Of course, it's tough to not do it at home. They gave him the spot. It was enough for a first down, and Curtis Samuel, correct me if I'm wrong, was the man who scored the touchdown to win the game for Ohio State down. I think they were down 27-24. He scored the winning touchdown on the very next play. Now, mind you, Michigan was winning in this overtime period. If they stop J.T. Barrett on 4th down right there, the game is over, folks. It's over. It's over. Michigan wins. They improve to number 2. And sure enough, they're going to go to the Big Ten Championship game, and they probably win that game, and they go to the college football playoff. Now, I can't tell you if they would have won the championship that season, but things change. You never know. This is the what-if game. But if this Michigan football team has a Big Ten championship, don't forget, Penn State's won one since Jim Harbaugh took over at Michigan. Penn State won a Big Ten championship game with 2 losses, and they didn't even make the playoff. So James Franklin has a conference title. Jim Harbaugh does not. Ohio State has plenty. So since Harbaugh has taken over, it's been Ohio State every single season since 1 year where Penn State won it because they beat Ohio State during the regular season. So what might have been? Well, let's just say, folks, if he has a conference title, he is not. There's little to no talk about him getting fired after 2020. Now, granted, he got that quote unquote short. It was a contract extension, but it had a bunch of stipulations on it. So essentially, he has to keep winning if he wants to survive the length of this deal. Now, unless they lose 5 in a row here, I mean, he's 7-0 right now. He'll come back next year. Unless there's a total collapse for the rest of the year, I mean, this Michigan team is probably going to win at least 9-10 games. I would say out of the next 5, they're going to win at least 3 of them, probably. Maybe their losses are to Michigan State and Ohio State. Maybe they beat Penn State this year. But even if that's the case, all right, you lose your in-state rival and your biggest rival. All right, that's going to stink. But if they're going to win 10 games, they're probably going to be in the New Year's Six bowl game, most likely at 10-2. It's all going to depend on where Michigan State finishes, as well as Ohio State. Because one of them could make the playoff, and then we'll see if they're going to throw 2 more teams in the from the Big Ten to the New Year's Six. It's very interesting. It's just very, very interesting. One snap could have changed everything. Now, again, I'm giving Joe Clark credit here. This is where this is where it was reiterated to me. Now, 2015, the Michigan State game where the botched punt, it was not the same season, but it does it changes. It does change a lot. If that doesn't happen, there's not this overwhelming narrative on Harbaugh that he's having a big problem with Michigan State. Even if he wins just that one game against Ohio State, it's the only win. But it's like, remember the year they epically beat Ohio State in the horseshoe and won a conference title? I mean, it's there. It's there. I'm telling you. That's why there's so much pressure here today. That talk's out there. The big what-if game. Of course, you can't play what-if, and almost only counts in horseshoes, as they say. The game today, I can't say it's going to be it for Jim Harbaugh, but it certainly feels like it. It just feels like one of those days, one of those games where you're like, darn, this has to be the day they drop a game. It just feels like a Jim Harbaugh loss. Now, for me, I don't quite think like that is I'm trying to look at the product on the field from what I've seen and what I think is going to happen today. And of course, I'll reveal my pick for this game later in the show. But it's just mind-boggling to me how close he's been. And granted, folks, if Harbaugh were with any other school, with this type of head coach, I'll give you his head coaching record. 56-22 at Michigan. You know his only bad year? Last year when they played 6 games in a COVID season, when they played half a year. He was 2-4. Now, the narrative, of course, is what it is. He can't win the big one. He hasn't won more than 10 games at Michigan. He had 3 10-win seasons within his first 3 years. Don't forget this, though. They won a share of the division title in 2018. But that year, Ohio State had the tiebreaker. They were both 8-1 in the conference. But we all remember what happened in that game at Ohio State. And don't forget, folks, 2018, he had a similar spot. Michigan was number 4. It's like, all right, playoff time, baby. You just got to beat Ohio State this year. Ohio State was number 10. Lo and behold, 62-39. 62-39, folks. Absurd. No chance. And it was only 24-19 at halftime, don't forget. Only 24-19. 17 points for the Buckeyes in the third quarter, and they outscored 21-20 in the fourth. And Jim Harbaugh's squad is, once again, short of a Big Ten title game and the college football playoff. So he's had multiple situations like this. But as I was saying, 56-22. One bad year, and it was during the COVID season last year, which is basically a wash for everybody. Nearly every school in the country, it's not all, but I would say 95% of these Power 5 schools would take that no matter what. 56-22. And he's also a 7-0 start this year. Granted, he's 1-4 in bowl games. Not great. But you would take that. You would take that record day in and day out. And the guy is 114-49 overall as a college head coach. Just don't forget his success over at San Diego before he went to Stanford. Now, Stanford, it built up slowly because he was 4-8 and 5-7 his first 2 years, and he was 8-5, and then all of a sudden he was 12-1 in 2010, won the Orange Bowl that year. And then he jumped to the NFL. But there's no telling what he could have done at Stanford post-2010. But he went to the NFL after that and then came back to college. Guy's a great coach. Has he peaked in Michigan? It's quite possible. But he's going to have yet another opportunity. I would say probably the third best opportunity with them all on equal footing, just based on how it's going right now. Because again, they were number 3 in 2016, number 4 in 2018, and they're on their way right now if they win today. It's going to be another one of those big-time opportunities for Jim Harbaugh and crew. And this we're not even at the Ohio State game yet, folks. He's got to be Michigan State today first. But this narrative is going to keep circling, especially it's only going to get deafening and so much louder if he loses today, if the Wolverines drop this game on the road. They're road favorites, so Vegas thinks that there's something there. We'll have to wait and see. We will just have to wait and see what happens with Harbaugh, Spartans, Mel Tucker. Does Mel Tucker all of a sudden become the much better coach than Harbaugh in just a year and a half? There's a lot riding on this game. Mel Tucker's going to be the hottest item in college football if they win this game today. There's already the LSU rumors. A lot riding on this, and it would just really stink for Michigan if it ends in a loss. And you look at that Ohio State game later in the year, and you're like, yeah, well, not much we can do about that. Can't be Michigan State. There's no way you're going to beat Michigan. There's no way you're going to beat Ohio State, even if it is in Ann Arbor. Tough scene. All right, we are going to step aside and take a quick break. On the other side, we'll start breaking down some of the other games this week. I'll dive into a little bit more of, it's a Big Ten heavy week this week, folks. So I'll dive into Ohio State and Penn State a little bit. Ohio State has definitely turned the corner with all these blowout victories. Penn State is reeling right now. Who knows if they can bounce back? Of course, it's very tough to bounce back against the Buckeyes, so we'll dive into that. We'll look at some other games going on here in Week 9, what the playoff standings the playoff rankings, could look like when it comes to Tuesday night in a couple days. And, of course, at the end of the show, we'll give you my 5 picks. 28-12 on the season. After a 4-1 week last week, let's keep the train rolling. We're almost at the 30 wins this year, folks. We're way above 500. It's been a great 40-game stretch so far. Let's keep the train rolling. Keep it locked here. You're listening to College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Betting college football? You've come to the right place. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbaugh Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
It's College Football Pick'em right on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. We'll lead you up to 9 a.m. today. Well, we spent a lot talking about Jim Harbaugh and what this game is going to mean for him today against Michigan State. And boy, I mean, there's just so much riding on it. And, I'm not afraid to say that I'm basically rooting for the guy at this point. I do want to see Michigan switch things up in the Big Ten. But, hey, they've been short. They've absolutely come up short every single season that he's been the head coach. So as far as some other things going on, again, I mentioned before, it was a Big Ten heavy game today, or a Big Ten heavy week this week. So Ohio State and Penn State, and I had to talk about this first before we dive into the college football playoffs rankings that are going to be coming out on Tuesday. To me, this is bonkers, folks. The fact that Penn State lost to Illinois. Now, this is regardless of what you think. I'll dive into the overtime rules in a second. But that's just terrible. I mean, we were set up for the Big Four in the Big Ten East to all have one loss or less, be in the top 10, and just have an absolute bloodbath of a late October, November. That's what we were set up for, and Penn State blows it. They blew it. You cannot sugarcoat it. It's a terrible loss. And again, you had to go through the I guess you can call them wacky overtime rules because it was a 9 overtime game when you break it all down. But it's when you're 10-10 going into overtime. Again, this is an Illinois team that stinks. Illinois absolutely stinks. They are rebuilding. Now, can a guy like Brett Bielema bring this team to relevance in the Big Ten West? Maybe shock some people down the line? Yeah, Brett Bielema's done that before. He's been a heck of a coach. Guy coached Wisconsin. He knows Big Ten football. He knows how to recruit those big boys out in the Midwest. They're not supposed to win this game. They're not. And I know we get this every year. We get this every year with some of these games, and some of these teams where, you look again, we're using this game as an example where a Penn State is number 7 in the country. They're 5-1. They're hosting a cross-divisional opponent. They should mop the floor with them. I'm pretty sure they were nearly a 3-touchdown favorite against the Fighting Illini at home. I get it. Believe me, I get it. But I know it's supposed to happen somewhere along the line during a college football season that you're going to get one of these games, but it's not supposed to happen this week. And I'm not saying, and believe me, I'm not a Penn State fan. I'm not saying this as a bitter Nittany Lions fan at all, where I'm salty that Illinois won. In fact, I mean, me, if I'm going to talk about my fandom and whatnot, of course, I would love to see Penn State lose as a Rutgers alum, as a Rutgers fan. But, if I'm going to talk to you folks as a radio show host here, I will say honestly, I love the chaos, but this is not supposed to happen. I didn't take this game last week. That was a lot of points. Plus, I liked a bunch of other games last week. But again, this is not supposed to happen. And I guarantee you, if somebody gave me the option of taking this game, I would have taken Penn State in the points because Illinois stinks. They stink. They have no passing attack. And now, their quarterback last week, Art Sikowski, was actually he's a Rutgers transfer, 8 of 19, 38 yards and an interception. And he hurt, I think it was his arm or hand. He broke something in one of the overtime periods. He's out for the season now with a broken arm. Out for the season. Brandon Peters, Michigan transfer. He's actually been at Illinois, I think now. This is his third year at Illinois, which is unbelievable to me. He threw the game-winning 2-point conversion. But the passing game for the Fighting Illini has been awful this year. And I'm talking bottom of the barrel, bottom of the Big Ten bad. Even Graham Mertz over Wisconsin hasn't been this bad this year. But the run game, where'd this run game come from? Chase Brown had 223 yards on a touchdown. Joshua McCray, who? Had 142 yards? Illinois' got some players, man. They have some players all of a sudden that could run the football. On that Penn State defense, they're running the football like that. And on the flip side, you look at all right, if you take out Sean Clifford's 28 yards lost due to basically due to sacks, take that out. Penn State ran for 90 yards. They ran for 90 yards. Noah Cain, 43 yards. That's it. Kevon Lee, 24. John Lovett, the transfer. It was all of a sudden, going to add so much depth to this backfield. 21. Again, granted, he only had 5 carries. And he was averaging 4.2 yards a pop, but he only had 21 yards. Sean Clifford, coming off that injury, even with the week off, didn't look that great. 19 of 34, 165 yards and a touchdown. If you're averaging less than 5 yards a completion, boy, your offense is moving slow. And I get it was a sloppy game. Weather was a factor. But come on, man. Now to the overtime. I'm sure you folks are still buzzing about this from last week. The overtime is wacky. But you know what? I kind of like it. It was just me covering the game last week where I'm like, oh my goodness gracious, just end this already. Somebody score. So after the second overtime, if it is still tied, only if it's still tied, they go from the third overtime on, it's a 2-point conversion shootout, essentially. So the ball is placed at the 2.5 or 3 yard line, excuse me, and then they go for 2-point conversions. And they literally are 2-point conversions. If you convert, you get 2 points. It's not like you're scoring. It's not like it's scoring touchdowns where that would drastically affect overs and totals, and that would drastically affect totals. Can you imagine if this game went 9 overtimes and they kept trading touchdowns and it was just 6 points, 6 points, 6 points? That'd be a very inflated total, and that would be the worst way to lose one of those bets. And the game hit the under. It was 38, even with 9 overtimes, even with all these opportunities with 7. So essentially, with 7 periods, there could have been 14 extra points. And what I mean, like 14 extra points scored. So it was 10-10. This game could have been, 30? It could have been 24-24 going into the 10th overtime, essentially, if they kept scoring. But they go for these 2-point conversions. No one was scoring. And then when they finally did score, the other team answered back finally. So of course that's going to happen. But Illinois had the last laugh, threw the game winner, and boom, they win. They get the upset. Is it a cheap upset? I wouldn't say that. They went in there and played their butts off. It's not a cheap upset. It's a weird way to win a game because it's the regular season and you're winning by a 2-point conversion shootout. Yeah, it's a weird way to win a football game. I don't necessarily, if I was on the losing end of that, I'd be questioning a lot of things. But if you're Penn State, you also have to question, why were you in that position in the first place? Why did you only score 10 points in 4 quarters at home against Illinois? That I won't understand. That I cannot understand. But fact remains, they fell 20-18. They dropped to number 20. They take on Ohio State today, and folks, it's not pretty. It's not going to be pretty. I don't think so. Don't get me wrong. Penn State always. I do not have this game, so I will talk about it a little bit more before we dive into the college football playoff rankings, folks. I don't have this game written down, but and again, I know Penn State plays them really well, pretty much every single season. The problem is, look at this line. 18.5. It's at the horseshoe. 18.5 and the total is, I'm saying only, is only 61. Because if you look at Ohio State's last few games, my God. Now, they're playing pretty much tomato cans at this right now to kind of warm back up. But since C.J. Stroud's injury. Now, he got hurt before the Akron game, and the Akron game they won 59-7. Now, it was shaky early on because they were only up 14-7 after the first quarter. That's when Kyle McCord started. But they won that game 59-7. And granted, Ohio State has not played the cream of the crop. They haven't played Michigan State. They haven't played Michigan yet. Heck, they haven't even played Nebraska and Purdue yet. I mean, look at their schedule this year for Ohio State. Now, don't get me wrong. I think Ohio State's legit, and they are the best team in the Big Ten right now. But they beat Minnesota on the road. Minnesota's up and down, starting to pick it back up again. They lose at home to Oregon, very good football team. They beat Tulsa by only 21. That's where, and then Stroud's hurt, right? 59-7 over Akron. Stroud comes back the next week against Rutgers. The next game against Rutgers, at Rutgers. And this is a Rutgers team that was coming off a 20-13 loss to Michigan. You're like, okay, the Scarlet Knights team is actually a little bit legit. You know, they nearly went into the big house and upset the Wolverines. 52-13. Stroud, the offense looks absolutely absurd. Next game, Maryland at home, 66-17. Dominate. At Indiana. That everyone had that game circled this year just because it was Indiana, and Indiana played them close last year, and everyone thought, well, Ohio State didn't hit that threshold of 6 games, so Indiana got screwed out of the Big Ten championship game. No. 54-7. Yeah, you can forget about 2020. 2020 was an outlier. And you still didn't beat Ohio State. 54-7. So again, even within the Big Ten, the last 3 games they've played their division foes, which they have to do, but they played Rutgers, Maryland, and Indiana. I mean, come on, folks. Maryland's probably the best of the bunch, and they beat them by, if my math is right here, 39 points. 49 points, sorry. I can't see. I can't count. 49 points. And that's a Maryland team that actually has the potential to have a high-powered offense because Taulia Tagovailoa, before his latest slump, was actually playing at a very high level. And at one point, I had him as the best quarterback in the Big Ten. Through the first month, of course. That's where Stroud was going a little up and down. But the fact remains, you expect this Penn State team to contend with this Ohio State team. Look at that offense from the Nittany Lions last week. I told you, Sean Clifford throwing less than 5 yards a pass. The rushing offense was below 100. Where is Noah Cain? Where's Jahan Dotson in the receiving game? Sure, that defense held Illinois to, 10 points in the regulation? You're not holding Ohio State. You're not holding Ohio State in the horseshoe to 10 points in regulation. It's just not happening. It's just not happening. Good luck. It's not. No way. Not happening. It won't. It can't. It can't. Which leads me to the college football playoff rankings now. Now, Penn State, granted, if they somehow, some way, again, they always play them tough, so I'm not going to rule out Penn State playing them tough. But if they somehow, some way upset Ohio State, that really throws a loop. And now the Big Ten is going to be relying on the winner of Michigan State to make the playoff. But that gives Ohio State 2 losses. Penn State has 2 losses. And all of a sudden, Penn State has the tiebreaker over Ohio State. And Penn State has yet to play Michigan State and Michigan. So the Big Ten could beat each other up. And all of a sudden, they're going to eliminate themselves. So right now, Georgia 1, Cincinnati 2, Bama 3, Oklahoma 4, and the 2 on the outside looking in are Ohio State and Michigan at 5 and 6. Now, this is the AP poll. This is not the college football playoff rankings yet. Not yet. That comes out Tuesday. So the biggest thing is going to be, all right, how do they, Georgia's going to be number 1. As long as they keep winning, they're going to be number 1. But how do they weigh an undefeated Cincinnati team against number 3 Alabama right now? Number 3 according to the AP poll. But how do they weigh Cincinnati against Alabama right now? And again, we have to play the games today. Got to play the games. Got to play out Week 9, and then we'll have our answers. But how do you weigh Cincinnati, who is undefeated, does have a win over Notre Dame on the road? And again, this is in the future, but just for reference, they have a ranked SMU team coming up at the end of the year. SMU's number 19 in the country, so that's only going to help Cincinnati's case. But is the committee going to legitimately say Cincinnati is better than Alabama? No, they're not, and I don't think they are better than Alabama. Now, do I think Cincinnati has deserved their number 2 ranking based on how they played, based on what they were in the preseason, based on the other teams right now? I know Oklahoma's 8-0, but Oklahoma barely beat Kansas, and they've been quite the fun team to watch because you're just expecting them to get upset at any point, but they keep winning. Would Cincinnati beat Oklahoma head-to-head? I'm going to say no at the moment, but it'd be pretty close. Would Cincinnati beat Ohio State? No. Would Cincinnati beat Michigan? Probably not. Would they beat Oregon? Maybe. I mean, so at best, is Cincinnati your 6th team? Would they legitimately drop from number 2 to 6? I mean, again, I say drop, but I mean going from the AP's number 2 team to the College Football Playoff Committee, the College Football Playoff Committee's rankings number 6. Yeah, it's totally possible. Georgia's going to be 1, folks. Georgia will be 1. You're probably going to see, as long as they keep winning, it's going to be Georgia 1, Bama 2. You're probably going to see Oklahoma 3. Ohio State, as long as they win, they're going to move to 4. And then the winner between Michigan and Michigan State is going to be 5. Then you see Cincinnati 6. Or 7, because they might drop Oklahoma down to number 6. Because frankly, I think Ohio State and Michigan are more impressive than Oklahoma right now, so you might even see Cincinnati go all the way to 7. So your first teams on the outside looking in are going to be the winner of Michigan, Michigan State, and then Oklahoma. Georgia 1, Bama 2. Maybe I miscounted there, folks. Georgia 1, Bama 2. You know what? The committee is probably going to play Oklahoma at 3. Or 4. Let's just say Ohio State. They might consider Ohio State more impressive. So let's put Ohio State at 3, Oklahoma 4, then Michigan/Michigan State at 5, and then Cincinnati at 6. But maybe they put Oregon over Cincinnati. So again, Cincinnati's going to be in the 6 or 7 spot anyway. It's all going to depend. But they're not going to get enough respect until they finish undefeated and, of course, beat SMU and win a conference title. They probably have to beat SMU twice. SMU, I would think, is going to be the second best team, so they're going to have to play each other again in the conference title game. So if Cincinnati beats them twice, yeah, that'll help. And if they're 13-0, then it's going to be hard to keep them out. But again, the playoffs are just absolutely wacky. Cincinnati is that group of 5 team that could be the first group of 5 team to get in, but they also throw a wrench into everybody else's plans because they're highly regarded right now. But if they are dropped outside of the top 4 when it comes to Tuesday's rankings, then you have to wonder what they have to do in order to get into that top 4. Let's not discount Iowa. Now, granted, Iowa would have to go 12-1 overall and beat Ohio State in the championship game to even have a chance to get in. Ole Miss already lost to Alabama, so they'd have to hope for some chaos in front of them. Remember the year where let's go back to, it was the year Penn State, and again I bring this up a lot because it's the most polarizing example of the playoff era. Penn State 11-2, Big Ten champs, but Ohio State, their one loss is to Penn State, who is the Big Ten champ, but Ohio State gets in the playoff over Penn State just because Ohio State has one loss, Penn State at 2. They had a bad loss to I think it was Pitt that year or somebody else, so the committee kept them out. It would have to be one of those. It would have to be one of those situations where Alabama wins the SEC. They're 12-1. Let's say they beat Georgia, but then Georgia might still get in anyway because that could be their only loss. But that would be Ole Miss's best shot if they were 11-1. But then you're going to put 3 SEC teams in. You're not going to do that. There's the cries for playoff expansion, folks. Ole Miss not totally out of it just because they're 10th right now, but it's also going to depend on where the CFP puts them. Notre Dame would have to finish 11-1, but they might be out of it as an independent this year, but they don't have a conference title game. Kentucky, out of it. They lost to Georgia. But again, similar situation to Ole Miss and Bama, I guess, but they're not going to get in. Wake Forest, to me, is the most interesting team that's undefeated, but they're so far out of it because they haven't, don't get me wrong. They've played, I guess, some quality teams, but they haven't really played anybody, folks. Old Dominion, Norfolk State, Florida State. They did dominate a pretty good Virginia team, though. edged out Louisville, edged out Syracuse. They needed 70 points to beat Army last week. Wake Forest is not making the playoff, but they very well could win the ACC. They have Duke. They're probably going to win. North Carolina's going to be the big one, because I think North Carolina's starting to turn the corner a little bit. NC State's going to be tough. At Clemson is tough anyway, even though Clemson's down this year. And then at Boston College. So, I mean, the schedule picks up now for Wake Forest. But let's just say this team's 13-0 out of the ACC. It is a Power 5 conference, and at least on paper, they beat Clemson, which, again, Clemson's down. But they'll beat North Carolina as well, and they'll beat NC State and Boston College. Again, these teams this is the harder part of their schedule. Now, who would they play in the championship game? Probably Pitt, the way they're playing. Maybe a rematch with Virginia. But they already have 2 conference losses, so I don't think so. But Virginia has yet to play Pitt. So they're probably going to play Pitt or Virginia in the conference title game. Would the best case scenario for Wake Forest say they go 13-0, but they beat a 1-loss Pitt team in the conference title game? Would Wake Forest get playoff consideration? Probably, but they're not. I feel like they're not going to get in. But it would be very hard to keep out a 13-0 Power 5 champ. So Wake Forest can really screw things up. Wake Forest out of all teams. But again, that means they have to win the last 5 games and then win the ACC title, which that's asking a lot. They've done a lot already this year, but so a lot of factors. Still early in terms of these rankings, so we'll see how it shakes out on Tuesday. And of course, we have to wait on the results from this week to really determine where these things are going to shake out. I mean, if we have upsets, then we're going to go bonkers on Tuesday. Just to let you know that will happen if there's upsets. If there's upsets. All right, we're going to step aside, take another break. On the other side, we will dive into my 5 picks of the week, 28-12 on the year, 4-1 last week. Let's try to go 4-1. If not, let's go have another 5-0 weekend this week as well. Keep it locked here, listening to College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490. Sports Betting Radio.
Betting college football? You've come to the right place. It's College Football Pick'em, presented by Harbor Jiu-Jitsu on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.
Final segment of the show here on College Football Pick'em on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio. Nick Kosko with you, taking you up to 9 a.m. Got some intriguing games. I know we talked a lot of Big Ten today, but hey, I'm a Big Ten guy. It's a Big Ten heavy weekend as well. So speaking of the Big Ten, we're going to dive right into my first game, which is Michigan and Michigan State. We broke this down ad nauseum to open up the show. It's Michigan -4, by the way. Interesting line, road favorite. And folks, if you know me, I usually don't do this, but I have to, because I am a Jim Harbaugh believer. Now, this might be me with my heart and not my gut/head. I want Jim Harbaugh to have this game. He needs to have this game. I don't know if he's going to be able to do it, but for some reason, I just have a feeling he'll at least get by the Spartans. Now, when they play Ohio State, completely different story. But for now, I'm going to trust Jim Harbaugh on the road, where he actually is 2-1 against Michigan State. He's 3-3 against the school. 2 of the wins have come on the road in East Lansing. Just pointing that out there. -4 on the road at the Spartans. Number 6 versus number 8, both undefeated. Game of the week for sure at 12 in just a few hours. Give me the Michigan Wolverines -4 at Michigan State. It's going to be a battle of the run games and the defenses. Now, if Michigan State is well balanced and Kenneth Walker is beating up that Wolverine defense and Peyton Thorne is actually able to throw the football, it could be a long day for the Wolverines. But if both teams play ball control, Kenneth Walker is the best running back in the field, but the combination of Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins on the other side, plus with the efficiency from Cade McNamara, I do want to favor Michigan. And again, this is Mel Tucker's first huge game. And again, I know they beat Michigan last year, but this is Mel Tucker's first huge game in this rivalry. And now that he has his team in the top 10, they're undefeated. There's a lot of pressure. It's at home, so it's going to help, but a lot of pressure. So I'm going to lean towards Harbaugh, and that's why I'm going to take Michigan -4. All right, Iowa at Wisconsin, the always tough Camp Randall Stadium in Madison. Now, Wisconsin had their best win of the year last week, 30-13 over Purdue to finally get that monkey off their back a little bit. They're at 4-3, so they're going to be in bowl contention here as long as they win at least 2 of their last 5 games, which I think they are going to do. But Iowa had the week off after the upset loss to Purdue. Speaking of them, but I think they are going to bounce back here. They're 6-1. They're a top 10 team for a reason. Number 9 right now. Spencer Petras is not the best quarterback, but don't forget they also have a stout running game and a great defense. Now it's just a matter of can they contain the running attack of Wisconsin led by Chez Mellusi, because Graham Mertz is not going to throw the football. Now, I was a big Graham Mertz supporter and believer, and he has crashed and burned. He has ruined my faith in him. So Wisconsin is going to basically have to win this game by just running the football, and well, because Mertz threw it 8 times last week. That's it, 5 of 8 last week. They don't trust him at all to throw the football, especially if their run game is on. Now, is their run game going to be that on against a very tough Iowa defense? I am not so certain. It's possible, but this could be an old school slug it out defense, heavy running attack type of Big Ten game. I know it's in Camp Randall, so that's why Wisconsin is the favorite. But I do think Iowa is going to win this game outright, so that's why I love the plus 3.5 for the Hawkeyes. So take Iowa plus 3.5 at the Wisconsin Badgers for this highly anticipated Week 9 matchup. Low key, though, in the Big Ten, based on, of course, Michigan State and Ohio State, Penn State. All right, third game, Ole Miss and Auburn. Number 10, Ole Miss at number 18, Auburn. It's at Jordan-Hare. So the Tigers do host. They are the favorites for a reason because, again, it is Jordan-Hare. But it's only a 3-point spread right now. It was 2.5 earlier in the week. So it looks like the money is going towards Auburn. We had it at 2.5 when we talked to our good buddy Rich Quinones on Wednesday, actually. We did a little bit earlier this week on Back Your Play on AM 1490, this very station. So we're going to make that small modification. So we have Ole Miss now plus 3 going into today's game. This game is basically, all right, who do you prefer a quarterback? Because the total is at 66.5, so there are going to be points today. Is Matt Corral healthier than he was against LSU last week? I certainly hope so. I do prefer the combination of Lane Kiffin and Matt Corral than Brian Harsin and Bo Nix. That's simply what it comes down to for me. And again, it's another game where I do think the road team is going to win this contest today. So give me Ole Miss plus 3 at Auburn. Kentucky at Mississippi State. Guess what? We had this -1 for Kentucky. It's even now. It's even money. Even, folks. Pick them. Just pick the winner. So if you tell me you're going to pick the winner between number 12 Kentucky and Mississippi State, and again, I don't fully trust Mike Leach in the SEC yet. Will Rogers playing pretty well at quarterback now, so the Leach offense is starting to adjust to the SEC after last year. Last year was horrendous after week 1. But Kentucky's only loss this year is to Georgia. All right, they have a really good running game with Chris Rodriguez Jr. and of course you have Will Levis, a quarterback. I'm a fan of him. I know it's on the road. They didn't look too good against Georgia, but nobody looks good against Georgia this year. So if you're going to just tell me to pick a winner, that's where we are right now. I do like Kentucky in this one to keep the train rolling. They'll keep it as a football school until we get deeper into basketball season later this year. So give me Kentucky over Mississippi State. Final game, North Carolina at Notre Dame. And here is where we take our second favorite of the week. It's Notre Dame -3.5. Line has not shifted since we looked at these games earlier in the week. I like Notre Dame. Now, North Carolina is picking it back up now. Sam Howell looking much better. Of course, and a couple CBS Sports mock drafts actually have him going back into the first round after struggling to start the 2021 season. Now, again, he would look great as a freshman, look great as a sophomore, and now he's doing that little Jekyll and Hyde thing this year. But he's looking good again, so you have to be wary of him. And, of course, they still have Ty Chandler in the backfield, the Tennessee transfer. So North Carolina's offense is there. Josh Downs, don't forget about him, too, one of the leading receivers in the country. So this is a high-powered offense, so it's just a matter of, is Notre Dame going to be able to contain them and play ball control as well? Jack Cohn, whoever's at quarterback today for Notre Dame, the quarterback play has dipped a little bit, but they still have Kyron Williams. It's a very weak run defense for North Carolina as well. So maybe he goes off today. And again, it's in South Bend. Notre Dame hosts. They keep winning for a reason. And again, they were upset by Cincinnati, and Cincinnati is now the number 2 team in the country. But for some reason, they just keep winning. And I don't fully trust North Carolina again because, again, they were my popular pick to be a dark horse in the ACC. I shouldn't even say dark horse. They were one of my favorites in the ACC to challenge Clemson this year simply because of Sam Howell. I don't fully trust them again yet, so we're going to roll with Notre Dame minus 3.5. All right, so picks for the week. Just a quick recap. We have Michigan minus 4 at Michigan State. Iowa plus 3.5 at Wisconsin. Ole Miss plus 3 at Auburn. We have Kentucky at even and a pick'em at Mississippi State. And, of course, as I just mentioned, we have Notre Dame minus 3.5 at home against North Carolina. It's going to be a banner of a college football weekend, folks. What a Saturday we have. Some big-time matchups in these Power 5 conferences. And all of a sudden, we're going to be turning the calendar to November when we talk to you next week. And we're that much closer to rivalry weekend. And we're going to have college football playoff rankings to talk about as well next week. A lot of madness could be happening today. So enjoy the college football today, folks. Thanks for tuning in. I will talk to you next week. You've been listening to College Football Pick'em right here on AM 1490 Sports Betting Radio.